I want you to imagine waking up in your bedroom. You are tucked beneath this mountain of silk blankets, perfectly warm.
Sounds lovely.
Right. But the very second your eyes open, a May rushes into the room and just flings your windows wide open to a howling winter blizzard.
Oh, goodness.
And then while the freezing wind is literally blasting the curtains horizontally, that same maid drops to her hands and knees and frantically tries to spark a roaring fire. Open windows, roaring fire, sub-zero blizzard, all at the exact same time.
It sounds absolutely barbaric.
Welcome to the so-called healthy morning routine of the 19th century aristocracy. And honestly, just thinking about it makes my back absolutely ache.
I can imagine.
I mean, I have this very specific bone-deep soreness this week. It comes from, well, hauling damp firewood across a freezing courtyard and scrubbing wet moss off ancient paving stones before dawn has even thought about breaking. I basically feel like some sort of forest spirit who got banished to the scullery. It is back-breaking labor.
Oh, you have my absolute utmost sympathies, truly. I, on the other hand, consider my week a triumphant success simply because I managed to entirely avoid the harsh, dreadful glare of the morning sun.
Typical?
It is. I stayed perfectly cloistered behind heavy velvet curtains. There is honestly nothing quite so dreadful as being forced into the daylight before one is strictly ready. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, it must be nice in the shadows.
Yeah.
But your cloistered little week actually brings us perfectly to the core of what we are unpacking today.
Oh, does it?
Yeah. Because if you, the listener, are standing in the grand echoing foyer of a drafty 19th century manor house, and you want to live this graceful, elegant life, how do you actually run the place?
Right. Who is doing the hauling and the moss scrubbing while you hide from the morning sun?
Exactly. It's the eternal question of the aristocracy. The aesthetic of effortless grace requires, an absolutely massive amount of concealed, exhausting effort.
It really does.
So our mission for this deep dive is to explore a fascinating manual from 1833. It's called the Handbook for Young Ladies, or Handbok for unga fruntimmer.
Written by Countess de G.
Yes, and we have our hands on a Swedish translation from the third French edition, which was printed in Örebro. We're going to tear into the first two chapters of this book to completely debunk the modern myth of 19th century grace.
It is going to be quite the revelation.
Oh, for sure. By the time we're done, we're going to reveal the gritty, freezing, and frankly brutal reality of the servant labor required to maintain this beautiful facade.
It's quite the juxtaposition, really, because before we dive into the grueling, hyper-specific rules of running the household, we must look at how deceptively cozy the origin of this book is.
Oh, it really sets a scene.
The framing of the narrative is just dripping with atmosphere. The author, the Countess, recounts moving out to the country, and she spends her time visiting the home of an elderly, soulful, and incredibly wise aristocratic lady.
Very picturesque.
Exactly. And the Countess describes these winter nights in vivid detail. Outside, there are violent, freezing storms raging. She literally describes the wind attacking the roofs and the treetops with absolute violence, as if nature itself is trying to tear the house apart.
But inside,
This elderly lady sits by a softly crackling fire with a small, quiet circle of women. The author, the lady's daughter, and her granddaughter. And there, bathed in the warm firelight, she imparts her supreme secrets of household economy and order.
Okay, let's unpack this because the irony here is just painfully thick.
It really is.
Listen to that setup. If you read that description, it sounds exactly like the opening of a spooky Gothic novel, right?
Pure Mary Shelley.
Yes. You are fully expecting someone to lean in, lower their voice, and tell a terrifying ghost story about a phantom wandering the moors.
It is the perfect atmospheric buildup for a tale of terror.
But instead, the ghost story they are whispering about in the firelight is a grueling, mind-numbing manual on household management.
They are dramatically whispering about pantry inventory.
Right. And let me just say, from my own personal moss-scrubbing experience, it is incredibly easy to preach the virtues of economy and order when you are sitting safely by a crackling fire. A fire that a servant had to haul in from the freezing rain, by the way.
Oh, certainly. The person philosophizing about the warmth is almost never the person chopping the wood.
Never.
But what's fascinating here is why she frames it this way. The book doesn't present household management as a mere list of daily chores. It is elevated to a supreme moral virtue.
How so?
Well, the Countess is suggesting that surviving the terrifying, chaotic storm outside requires creating an absolute oasis of supreme order inside.
Oh, I see.
Yes, the domestic sphere isn't just a house. It becomes a literal and spiritual fortress against the wildness of nature. If the outside world is chaos, the inside must be rigorously, almost obsessively controlled.
But it's a fortress built entirely on the backs of the invisible staff,
Naturally.
which logically make me wonder, how do you physically structure a fortress to keep out the chaos? Where do you even begin building this oasis of order?
You begin with the blueprints. The Countess's manual insists that the physical positioning of the rooms is fundamentally a matter of life or death, health.
Life or death, really?
Absolutely. And the rules are incredibly strict. South-facing rooms are the absolute ideal for living spaces. East and west are considered acceptable. However, the north must be strictly avoided for any living quarters.
She writes that you must, quote, carefully avoid the north, like the compass direction itself is cursed. Why the north?
Because, in the 19th century mindset, it effectively was cursed. This reflects the era's absolute obsession with directional health and what was known as miasma theory.
Wait, hold on. Explain the actual science they believed in here, because I know it wasn't just about wanting a good tan in the drawing room.
Hardly.
So what exactly did they think the north was doing to them?
Right, so miasma theory was the deeply held medical belief that diseases were caused by bad air, specifically toxic vapors emanating from decaying organic matter.
Okay, toxic vapors.
And how did this bad air travel? It was carried by cold, damp drafts. The north wind in the northern hemisphere was notoriously freezing and damp. They believed that this specific dampness carried the miasma right through the walls and windows.
Wow.
So protecting the family didn't just mean staying warm, it meant physically blocking the disease-carrying north wind.
So they just don't build rooms facing north?
Well, every house must have a north side, but the north was reserved only for what the manual calls unfrequented rooms.
Unfrequented by who, I wonder?
Exactly. The pantry, the storage rooms, the antechambers, the scullery. The manual states they are allowed to face the dreaded cold north without causing any inconvenience.
Right, no inconvenience to the Countess. But I have to interject here, and I want you, our listener, to really picture this scenario.
It's quite the image.
Think about the layout of this house. If the family is terrified of the north wind carrying literal poison, guess who spends all day, every day, working in those freezing, unfrequented north-facing rooms? The domestic staff, naturally. The servants. The maids fetching the preserves. The cooks laboring in the drafty pantry. The footmen shivering in the antechamber. I just have to laugh at this era's concept of health.
It is deeply ironic.
Their idea of a healthy home basically meant taking all the drafty, miserable, freezing, supposedly disease-ridden parts of the house and pushing them entirely onto the invisible workforce.
A very convenient science.
The servants are acting as a literal human insulation layer against the miasma. The family stays healthy and warm in the south-facing sunlight, while the servants are essentially left to catch pneumonia in the northern shadows.
It is a striking, deeply cynical spatial segregation of comfort. Architecture itself enforcing the class divide. The servants absorb the environmental hazards so the aristocracy doesn't have to.
Completely shielded from it.
And if the servants are acting as the human shield in the freezing north, we must ask, how does the master of the house protect himself in his own sanctum?
Oh, the master's chamber. This is where it gets incredibly specific and where the whole pseudoscience thing really kicks into high gear.
It certainly does.
Because the manual states that since the mistress oversees the entire house, she must treat her husband's room as the absolute most important room in the home.
It is the physical center of patriarchal authority. It requires ultimate reverence.
Yes, but ironically, it's not described as lavish at all. It must be quiet, simple, and completely isolated from any household noise.
Very utilitarian.
Very. The furniture is strictly functional, a desk covered in a green cloth for his work, a mirror with a simple mahogany frame, a plain sofa, and a simple bed. And she is very strict about the bed.
Oh, the alcove rule.
Exactly. She specifically forbids an alcove bed, warning that sleeping tucked into a wall alcove severely damages your health.
Which again ties directly back to their intense fear of stagnant air. Alcoves trap the air. But how do they ensure the air remains moving and pure?
Well, this brings us back to that terrifying morning routine I mentioned at the very beginning of our deep dive. The grueling labor detail that made my raspy little heart skip a beat.
Prepare yourself.
The Countess instructs that in the dead of winter, the very moment the master wakes up, his windows must be thrown wide open for half an hour.
A full 30 minutes. In a 19th century Swedish winter.
Yes, and while the freezing sub-zero winter air is pouring into the room, the servant must simultaneously be in there building a roaring fire in the fireplace.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates the bizarre, contradictory pseudoscience of the era.
How so?
Well, the medical belief at the time was that the human body itself released toxic vapors while sleeping. The Countess actually uses the Swedish phrase, skingra skadliga utdönsningar.
Scattering harmful emanations.
Exactly. The human body was viewed as a miasma factory during sleep. So what is the mechanism to fix this? They believe that by combining the freezing, heavy fresh air from outside with the rapid, intense heat of a newly lit fire, you would create a violent thermal updraft.
Like a vacuum.
Precisely. The fire would act as a literal vacuum, sucking the heavy, stagnant night miasma out of the room and up the chimney, while the freezing window air flushed the space.
That is wild.
They were essentially trying to build a localized, violent weather system right inside the bedroom.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, from a practical standpoint. I want you to imagine the sheer physics of this. It is like trying to heat a camping tent in the middle of a blizzard using a hairdryer.
It is absolute madness from an energy perspective.
It defies all basic logic of heat conservation.
Mm.
And I have to push back on this whole toxic emanation theory. Did they think women didn't emit toxic vapors?
A very pointed question.
Right. Why is the maid risking frostbite to clear the master's toxic emanations? But as we'll see in a minute, the mistress gets an entirely different treatment. Was this pseudoscience just conveniently designed around whatever the master demanded?
Conveniently, yes. The pseudoscience always seemed to flawlessly align with the patriarchal needs of the house. The master's intellectual vigor required a perfectly cleansed atmosphere.
Intellectual vigor. Think of the poor maid providing that vigor. Imagine the sheer physical misery.
It's awful to picture.
Her hands are cracked and bleeding from the freezing water she's been using to scrub the stone floors. She comes into this room. The windows are flung wide open. The winter winds are blasting her in the face, and she is crouching on the stone hearth, trying to strike a spark to build a fire while practically freezing to death.
The suffering is immense.
All just to cleanse the master's emanations. The level of invisible bodily suffering required to execute that one single morning routine is staggering.
It is a profound lack of empathy, perfectly disguised as a medical necessity. The servant's physical body is subjected to extreme, life-threatening conditions simply to ensure the master's air is theoretically pure.
Exactly.
It highlights exactly what we discussed earlier. The effortless grace of the era is entirely subsidized by someone else's grit.
Perfectly said. Which makes the transition to the next room we visit almost comical in its hypocrisy.
Oh, the contrast is jarring.
Because if the master is in this freezing, functional wind tunnel of a room, what exactly is the mistress doing while the maid is getting blasted by the blizzard?
The mistress's chamber. This is where the manual shifts away from austere pseudoscience and plunges into absolute unapologetic luxury.
Complete opulence.
This room must face east or south so it is brilliantly light and perfectly warm the moment the sun rises.
But she doesn't actually want to look at the sun, does she?
Heavens, no. Waking up to direct sunlight would be terribly jarring for a lady of quality.
Of course.
The manual specifies that to protect the mistress's delicate eyes upon waking, the windows and the bed must be heavily draped in sky blue fabric. The text calls it Himmelsblatt-Teig.
Sky blue fabric.
The idea is that the light filtering through this immense amount of fabric creates a soft blue, cloud-like atmosphere, which prevents the sensitive nerves of the eyes from being shocked by any harsh morning glare.
I knew you would absolutely love this part. It has your name written all over it.
I must confess a deep personal appreciation for the sky blue curtains. Waking up gently, shielded from the violent, dreadful assault of the morning sun, it is a highly civilized, almost vampiric ideal.
You would thrive in 1833.
It is the absolute height of refined living. You create your own eternal twilight.
A perfectly draped canopy to ward off the terrifying daylight.
Exactly. And the centerpiece of this blue sanctuary is the bed itself. It must be exceptionally elegant, constructed of highly polished mahogany, and it must be shaped like a boat, a butt-form bed.
A mahogany boat bed. Why a boat?
This is a direct reflection of the French Empire style that absolutely dominated aristocratic European aesthetics in the 1830s. Even in a snowy Swedish manner, the cultural dominance of post-Napoleonic France dictated taste.
Fascinating.
The Empire style drew heavily on classical Roman and Egyptian motifs. By sleeping in a boat-shaped bed, you weren't just taking a nap, you were embarking on a classical mythological voyage into slumber. It was a massive status symbol.
A massive status symbol with a massive receipt attached to it.
Yeah.
Because the Countess isn't just giving vague design advice here. She actually drops the exact pricing on us.
She does.
She casually notes that this boat-shaped bed setup, which requires a lower mattress, 2 upper mattresses, a feather bolster, a square pillow, and slick blankets, will cost an exorbitant 200 to 300 riksdaler.
A staggering sum for 1833.
Let me put that staggering sum into perspective for you, the listener, because this is where the economics of this grace become truly sickening. To understand just how much 300 riksdaler is, we have to look at the invisible workforce we've been talking about.
The contrast is quite sobering.
The maid scrubbing the floors, hauling the wood, and getting blasted by the winter wind in the master's room likely made around 15 to 30 riksdaler in an entire year.
Goodness.
Yes. The mistress is literally sleeping on 10 to 20 years of her servant's wages. Just the bed itself.
And how does the Countess justify it?
She justifies this outrageous expense by smoothly telling her readers, oh, don't worry, it will last a lifetime.
An investment piece to ensure a lifetime of perfect sky blue mornings.
So what does this all mean? Let's put the whole ugly picture together for you. While the mistress of the house is literally floating in her 20-year wage mahogany boat, completely shielded from reality by expensive sky blue clouds of fabric.
The maid is freezing.
Exactly. The maid, who just survived the manufactured blizzard in the master's room, is now likely out in the hallway on her hands and knees. The book specifically mentions the labor of maintaining the mistress's room, hauling up the heavy green winter rugs, polishing the square marble commode, and ensuring not a speck of dust ruins the illusion.
It's exhaustive.
The manual prescribes this beautiful, ethereal, mythological existence for the lady of the house, but it relies entirely on a foundation of exhausting, hidden, and deeply underpaid physical labor.
It is a meticulously curated reality. The sky blue curtains aren't just hiding the sun, they are hiding the mechanics of the house itself. They are hiding the sweat, the freezing hands, and the sheer exhaustion of the people keeping the fortress running. And this raises an important question for you listening to this today. If we connect this to the bigger picture, to our modern lives, how much has truly changed since 1833?
Oh, that is a very uncomfortable question to ask, but a vital one.
We look back at this manual, and we easily see the glaring inequality of the maid freezing while the mistress sleeps in a silk boat. We scoff at the miasma theory that pushed the poor into the freezing north wing.
Right. We think we're so much better.
But we still obsess over perfect interior aesthetics today, don't we? We want the minimalist, perfectly ordered smart home with maximal natural light and seamless climate control. But we often completely hide the labor that makes it all possible.
That is so true.
Whether that is our own deep, crushing exhaustion from working entirely too many hours just to afford the aesthetic, or the invisible global supply chains and underpaid gig economy workers that deliver our modern conveniences magically to our doorstep.
The unseen hands.
Yes. We still desperately want that oasis of order against the chaos of the world, and we still want the manual labor to remain completely invisible.
That is painfully accurate. The mahogany boat beds have just been replaced by seamless overnight delivery and invisible digital infrastructure.
Yeah.
The invisible labor is still there, freezing in the proverbial north wing.
Indeed it is.
Where I want to say a massive, incredibly warm thank you to you, our listener, for joining us by the fire today. Thank you for sifting through the fascinating, contradictory, and frankly, physically demanding history of 19th century domestic life with us. We survived the northern drafts together.
Weathered the storm. But before we completely extinguish the candles on this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, rather chilling detail hidden much deeper in the Countess's manual.
Oh, lay it on me. I love a dark twist.
We spent all our time today in the front of the book discussing the elegance of sky blue curtains, the grandeur of mahogany beds, and the pseudoscience of perfectly built room-cleansing fires.
Yeah.
But if you bypass all that grace and flip all the way to the back of the manual, to page 147, the tone abruptly and violently changes. There, the Countess includes frantic emergency medical instructions for treating asphyxiation from coal gas. The Swedish term she uses is kolos.
Wait, carbon monoxide poisoning?
Precisely. It turns out successfully sealing yourself inside those perfectly appointed, heavily draped, roaring, fire-heated rooms occasionally backfired in the most horrific way.
Oh, goodness.
If the chimney draft failed or the coal burned improperly in that sealed fortress, it trapped the toxic exhaust inside. The quest for the perfectly heated, perfectly ordered home in 1833 wasn't just a matter of aesthetics or class division.
Wow.
Sometimes hiding from the storm outside and sealing yourself in that beautiful sky blue oasis was literally a matter of life and death. Something to think about the next time you close all the windows tight and turn up the heat.